All right, family. Happy Sunday. Thank you so much for everybody that is joining us today from wherever you are. Coffee and Candid Convo is live. It has been a few weeks since we have been in streaming. We have had a wonderful revival series at K-City over the last month and a half. We've had some great speakers, and we are shifting gears in the middle of the month. But it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we think it is important not only that we engage spiritually, but that we make sure that we are taking care of and answering and dealing with the cultural issues that are going on in our nation. We have been in the midst of a pandemic for the last year and a half, and it has affected all of our lives in multiple ways. And we have no idea when this will end, when things will get back to some kind of normalcy. But we realize we are all managing through challenges in ways unimaginable. And so we believe here at Coffee and Candid Convo to bring you the best so that we can engage and give you some information so that you can live your life to the fullest. We believe in living that best life at all times. And we want to make sure that you are fully equipped with what you need so that you can engage and endure whatever you have to face in your relationships, in your money, in your career. And we want to make sure you have what you need. Today, as always, my world famous co-host, Miss Alicia Sargent, is. I said Alicia Sargent. My homeboy is.
He's gonna get in trouble.
I got me in trouble, Lord Jesus. My world famous co-host, Miss Alicia Abraham. She is hanging out again.
You use my professional name. Sergeant is the professional name.
Okay. I was good. Okay. John, don't shoot me, John. Please don't shoot me. But Alicia is hanging out with us again. And you all, my friend, she was here with us last year. I believe it was twice at the beginning of the pandemic and a little bit midway through. Dr. Christina Brooks is hanging out with us again today. Hey, Christina.
Yay, so happy to be here with you guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do me a favor, y'all. I want you to hit those hearts. I want you to hit those likes. I want you to hit that share button. There's going to be some valuable information that is going to be coming your way today. We are focusing on anxiety, its cycles, and some strategies that will help you manage it as we are still in the midst of this pandemic. I'm actually going to get out the way and let the professionals lead the conversation today. But I'll be here engaging you in the chat room. Please, y'all, chat, engage, comment, share, like. But Alicia, I'm turning it over to you. I love y'all. I'll be back before it's over with.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thanks, Corey.
So how do you want me to address you? Should we say Dr. Christina Brooks, just Christina? How do you want me to address you this morning?
Christina is completely fine.
All right. Beautiful. Yeah. So good morning. Thank you for attending. First of all, as we're thinking about this pandemic, and we're also getting a lot of information from our states and local governments saying that, like, hey, we're transitioning back in to school. So naturally, like, parents and adolescents and children are having have a whole bunch of anxiety, especially going into this environment and considering COVID. So I guess before I ask that question, let me step back a little bit. Just what is anxiety? Let's just go for the basics. What's just anxiety? Let's explain to our folks, what's anxiety? What is it?
It's the feeling that we get. I think it's kind of like an overall kind of umbrella term that we use to describe like nervousness or worries or stress or like unpleasant feelings of any kind, really. Like just in talking with my friends and in talking with clients, people, we use that term anxiety so much to mean so many different things. Even people who talk about feeling angry and frustrated use that term, of like, I was feeling so much anxiety about it. So in the professional kind of stance of what it really means is that it's feelings of worry or fear, stress, nervousness. And it really comes from a place of, like, if you think evolutionary, it comes from a place of survival. It's like if we have a perceived threat that is happening in our environment, our brains signal this response of like fight, flight, or freeze so that we can protect ourselves and stay alive. So but anxiety can mean, like if we're talking about fear, it can be like an immediate threat in your face. So kind of like, the immediate threat of, like, let's say if we were walking down the street and, there was a lion on the loose, and that lion were in our face, that is that immediate threat. And so there's nervousness and worries too about like future threats. So things like I have a test coming up in the future, or just like you were mentioning, as we're thinking about schools reopening and going back into the workplace, thinking about what's going to happen when I get back into the workplace. What's it going to be like when I am face to face with people again and I have to give presentations, or I have to speak with my coworkers face to face. Kind of nervousness about like contamination or getting sick, maybe even social nervousness about kind of what are people going to think of me, and how are people going to perceive me. So that's really that nervousness. And then there's the stress part of anxiety, which is when I guess the external demands really outweigh our internal coping resources. So I mean, everybody's experienced stress throughout this pandemic. I think that's like a safe assumption to make, right? Because
Absolutely.
there has been so many more demands that have been placed on us, and so many more threats to our safety and our well-being. And so we've gone into overdrive, and haven't really had much of an opportunity to pump the brakes to kind of slow our systems down. And so that distress, or those stress levels have really caused us to have a lot of negative health impacts and psychological impacts.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, like anxiety, stress, nervousness, fears, worries.
Right. Those ruminating thoughts, right? Of the fear and the worry, right?
Yeah.
So you said something that was so key. You were talking about, you were talking about the psychological, and I'm so trying to be very cognizant that we're not talking to other clinicians. So so I'm also trying to make this very applicable to our audience, but we're talking about like the psychological, the biological, and the environmental effects. Those are some of the things that you talked about. But I also want to talk about, and going in on the biological a little bit, what are some of those, what is our understanding of, anxiety and the biological factors associated with anxiety? Are there any? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are a lot of biological factors associated with anxiety. I mean, a lot of the research over the years has shown that there is a strong genetic component to anxiety. So I guess before we go any further, really, we have to differentiate between anxiety and problematic anxiety, because we all do have anxiety, and it is a normal part. So like the biological part of it is that there's this part of our brain that is responsible for our emotions, and particularly our fear response. And one of those parts of the brain is one of the structures is the amygdala. And without getting, too too much into it. I mean, this is kind of like the smoke alarm in our brain. This is the thing that goes off when there's a threat. And so it then sends signals to our body to get ready to fight, flight, or freeze. So the other biological part of it is like once that part of your brain is activated, your heart starts to speed up.
Good. Yeah.
Starts to beat really fast.
Mhm.
Maybe our breathing, a couple things happen to our breathing. So we either like hold our breath, which then makes our heart beat even faster. And then once we finally come up for air, our breathing has to catch up. And so our breathing accelerates too, which then like just kind of perpetuates that physical cycle of anxiety. And so we kind of get sweaty armpits or like sweaty feet or sweaty hands, or sometimes people even describe like cold and clammy hands. You know, for me, when I get really anxious, like my fingers get cold. It's the weirdest thing. But we get shaky and
we clench a lot. I know I do. I clench and I get stressed and I get tense in my shoulders. Yeah.
Yep. Or in your abdomen. A lot of kiddos who have problematic anxiety. So this is where, so I guess backing up a second, right? Those are the natural responses to anxiety. They're not unusual. And I think most of us are familiar with that. And for the most part, when it's not problematic, you know, we know what to expect. We know that this is just a normal part of anxiety. We know it's going to run its course. But when anxiety is problematic, I guess a couple things happen. Biologically, our amygdala, or that part of our brain that controls our fear response, is in overdrive and it's going off all the time. And so it's kind of like having, you know, a smoke alarm in your house that is super sensitive. And that's really not discriminating between whether or not, you know, the house is on fire or if a piece of toast has been burnt in the kitchen. And so it's constantly going off. And then we're constantly receiving these responses in our body of, you know, the accelerated heart rate, the increases in our breathing, our tenseness, and we're in this kind of almost constant state of anxiety. So that's one of the things that happens when anxiety becomes problematic, is we're always in this, you know, fight, flight, or freeze state of being. And then the other thing that happens is that when you have anxiety that's problematic, we're more sensitive to the physiological arousal or that process that happens in our body. And so we kind of like, instead of thinking, oh yeah, this is a normal response to anxiety, it's kind of like we're jarred by that response, right? It's kind of like, oh, what's happening? Okay, oh my goodness. Like, because I'm feeling all of this stuff in my body, it means that there's really something wrong. It means that there is really like a real threat happening. And so we avoid whatever that is that's kind of triggering that fear response. And just really then like perpetuating that cycle of a fear response that starts up here.
Yeah. So it's even kind of like, you know, if you think, in taking your example, we've been in this space where we're not really interacting with a whole bunch of folk and, you know, socially rather, right? And so what I'm finding, or what I'm seeing with a lot of my clients, is this, you know, newfound social anxiety that they're having, and they're really kind of avoiding social interaction because of the fear to kind of put everything that you were saying in a concrete way, right? And so they have tremendous anxiety about it. They're tense when they think about having to go outside or to, you know, engage with folk, especially my kiddos. And I know your specialty is adolescents. So what kind of symptoms are you seeing in that population in terms of anxiety, whether it's just general anxiety or some of the more particular anxieties like social anxiety, right? So what are you seeing in your population?
Yeah, you know, since the beginning of the pandemic, I think in terms of the negative impact that the pandemic has had on anxiety for people who have generalized anxiety disorder, which is, adolescents or adults or kiddos who worry almost incessantly about a variety of things. So finances, getting sick, grades, being liked at school. And these are really uncontrollable worries. So if you think of like the uncontrollable worries is kind of like this never-ending record that's playing in your mind. That's what it's like for these kids and these adolescents. And so it really impacts their concentration at school. It really impacts their ability to focus, and engage as well. So for a lot of engage in the academics, engage in social situations, they tend to kind of withdraw a bit, as a way to try and manage those worries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and especially because what I noticed in my practice is that, we got a huge influx of adolescents and children. And one of the chief complaints from their parents are like, their grades are dropping, or they're not interested in school anymore, or they don't want to attend virtual school. And again, speaking to the withdrawal, and I think it was really hard for parents because I think, again, adults, we can pretty much transition a little bit easier, quicker to different environments for the most part. But for adolescents and for the kiddos, that's a whole different paradigm. So what can you tell parents to help them normalize some of the behaviors that they're seeing in terms of the academics? Like what do you tell your parents to normalize a lot of the behaviors and or the symptoms associated with anxiety?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I give them a lot of that information that we just talked about, why we're seeing what we're seeing. Um, I guess a couple things is that I try to communicate at least are, adjusting our expectations and managing our expectations of our kids at this point in time is really paramount. Similar to how we have to adjust and manage our own expectations for ourselves. And knowing that throughout this time, and as kids are throughout the time of transitioning to virtual learning, it was a big change. And, to your point, kids don't handle change as well as adults do typically. They don't have the experience and the skills to be able to know how do I adjust to this. So it really takes a lot of support from us. And with adolescents, especially, that validation from their parents, I mean, is like the number one thing, because, we that famous line, and, that from adolescents is, you just don't understand what I'm going through, and
Yeah.
And so if we can help our parents understand that that is paramount for our kids and for our adolescents, like, hey, I know this is a really hard process, and it's very challenging, and I can understand why your grades have taken a hit here. It can really kind of, I guess, create and set up a dynamic between parents and kids where it's more collaborative, and no longer is it like parents like, you need to do this and you need to do that, where the kid is like, oh, you don't understand. You just don't understand, and kind of like this, the reaction from adolescents is, my back is against the wall. I'm trapped. I'm cornered. Like, there's no way out of this. Right. But if we can kind of reduce that defensive response by just validating and saying, hey, I know where you're coming from, and really try to put ourselves in their shoes and understand that this is a really tough time for them, I think it can create that more of that like collaborative relationship and open communication to the adolescent, then being willing to listen and engage and find a solution to this problem.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the words that I'm hearing you say resoundingly is empathy, like parents being empathetic to just the environment that their adolescents, or even their, the little kiddos are in as well. Because this is really tough for them, especially for what we know about adolescents and kids, is that they need their routine and they like that stability, right? And so when you remove that and you insert a whole bunch of instability, the worries or the fears about COVID, or what is this virtual situation is going to look like, or more importantly, as we're transitioning back into schools, what is that going to look like, and am I going to be any risk health wise, right? And so it's those things as well. And so again, just parents, I'm going to encourage empathy, right? Just some basic empathy. So what are let's pivot a little bit. I want to talk about some anxiety. I want to talk about some anxiety techniques. Like, how do we manage it? How do we manage anxiety? And how do we know that it's impairing? Well, I guess before we go there, how do we know it's impairing our lives? So we talked about some of the avoidance piece. We talked about some of, what we feel in our body, but how do we know at one point, is it problematic?
Yeah, I think it's problematic when it is interfering in your life, when it's stopping you from doing those things that are really important. So healthy anxiety keeps you functioning, keeps you moving, keeps you safe, keeps you allows you to do those things that are meaningful in your life while keeping you safe. Problematic anxiety holds you back, keeps you stuck, and doesn't allow you to engage in those meaningful and enjoyable aspects of your life. And so it's not a friend. It's not something that's helping you. It's more of a foe, And so I guess we talked about for kids, it can stop kids from going to social events. It oftentimes, when it's really severe, stops kids from even going to school. It can stop kids from doing their schoolwork. So one part of anxiety is, perfectionism, like this idea that in order for me to prevent feeling bad or doing things wrong or having negative repercussions, I have to do everything perfectly. And so, when you have that kind of mindset and that mentality, it really stops you from getting started on a lot of things, because those are really high expectations to live up to. So when we sort of see that impairing kids in a really terrible way, what we see is, not doing schoolwork and failing grades. We also see, for adults, difficulties sleeping. So just kind of that ruminating or thinking about worries, as you're going to bed at night, and just having a really difficult time getting those worries out of your mind. It can impact your eating too. If you're constantly feeling worried or stressed, or there's a fear there, our stomachs feel really upset and nauseous a lot of the time. And so many times we won't eat. And it'll impact us in that way. It can stop adults from going to work. It can stop adults from going to church. It can stop adults from engaging in social interactions that otherwise could be really meaningful to them. So a common theme of where problematic anxiety really negatively impacts people is, when we are using avoidance as a primary way of coping with our anxiety. So we're using avoidance in a really inflexible way to avoid that physical experience of anxiety, or even to avoid the cognitive experience of anxiety, which are, those intrusive worries. So to your point, getting back out into the community and getting back out into our normal day-to-day lives as kids are returning to school and we're returning to work, we've been allowed to avoid this past year. We've been allowed to avoid so many different things, oh, I don't have to go to the grocery store.
Really? Groceries, right?
Yeah. And I don't have to go to this meeting with these coworkers, or I don't have to show up at work and try and navigate the difficult relationships that happen in the workplace. Or for kids, I don't have to go into school and I don't have to navigate the social world that's going on around me. I can attend school from behind a screen. I can attend work from behind a screen. It really does lower those demands, which are often triggering for that problematic anxiety. So the longer that we're allowed to avoid, and the longer that it's like a normative thing for us to do in our societies, it does mean, unfortunately, as we are re-entering, if you will, that we are going to experience an acute increase in those physical symptoms of anxiety and those worries too.
Yeah, I want to get into that a bit, that back to school anxiety. And I think to that point, like, how do we manage? So what are some techniques that we can do to manage our anxiety? So, as therapists, we know that there's all these techniques, right? There's cognitive behavioral therapy, there's exposure therapy, there's all these techniques that we can use. So, tell us, and I'm sure in your practice, you're probably using a whole bunch of everything to meet your clients' needs, but tell me what really you see as beneficial for especially your adolescents and the population that you work with, but also adults too. What has been beneficial? What are some techniques that folk can help manage this anxiety, these worries, these fears, and sometimes most of the times irrational fears. So what are some of these things that they can do, or some techniques?
So it's not, I mean, it's kind of, it's so hard to talk about this because
It is.
there are techniques that you can use. There are coping strategies that you can use and that we can use and that we use every day when our anxiety is not problematic. So I'll talk about those strategies, but I want to talk about them with this caveat in mind, like that these strategies are really band-aids if you have problematic anxiety. So if you are relying on relaxation and deep breathing, and you are relying on things like, I know people talk about distraction as a strategy, um, when and we can talk about the difference between, like, flexible attention and distraction, but when you are relying solely on these strategies to manage problematic anxiety, and you're also not simultaneously approaching or like facing your fears, then you're just putting a band-aid on things, so for when I'm working with clients, the number one thing that I keep in mind is exposure, and helping clients to understand, number one, why their anxiety is problematic and how avoidance in their lives is functioning to keep their anxiety in a problematic way and causing problems in their lives. So that psychoeducation piece of it is huge. Just really understanding why we're doing what we're doing and why we're feeling what we're feeling. And then the second part is helping clients understand and helping people understand different ways that they can reduce avoidance in their life and approach these situations that are causing them to feel these uncomfortable feelings of fear or nervousness, and doing so in like a very gradual way. It doesn't have to be, okay, I'm afraid for kids. It doesn't have to be, okay, I'm afraid of, going back to school and giving a presentation in my class after having not done it for over a year and a half. It can be, okay, well, and it's great. The gradual process that a lot of our kids have gone through is, well, let's return to school 2 days a week. So 2 days a week you'll be in school face to face, and then 3 days a week you'll be at home virtual. And now a lot more schools are transitioning into 4 days a week, and let's go from, okay, well, if you're feeling nervous about giving a presentation in class, why don't we record it first, and why don't we, instead of giving a live presentation, why don't we record it, show it to the class, and eventually over the course of the course, you can work your way up to giving a live presentation in class. So I always keep that like that. I keep that mindset around and really in the forefront Because if you can think gradual and systematically, I'm going to work my way up to this thing that scares me the most, that's where you're going to get the most success in reducing avoidance and facing your fears. And so as you're going through that process, there are some strategies that you can use, right, to help calm the overall like anxious arousal that you have. So the breathing strategies. Um, there's a ton of them out there. I guess a couple that, that I work with kids in using, I guess, it is deep breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And I use this with adults too.
Yeah.
So
And tell them why that's so important, the deep breathing part, and tell them, what the linkage to, our nervous system and all of that stuff is. So tell us why the deep breathing is so essential.
the deep breathing is so essential because it's like pumping your brakes when your engine is in overdrive. When you are speeding down the highway, you need to be able to slow things down. And if your brain is misinterpreting signals out there as legit threats when really there aren't, then your body's going to be in overdrive. And so we need to, as like gatekeepers of our body, we need to be able to slow things down. And so by taking a deep breath in, holding it for a second, and letting it out slowly, we can put those brakes on our system. It slows our breathing down, which then has a chain reaction, and it slows our heart rate down, and we can reduce just like that overall level of arousal that's happening in our bodies.
Yeah.
And that's really important because then if our bodies are calm, our brains get the signal that, okay, all right, there's nothing really out there that I need to be, aware of. There's no real threat out there. And so it reverses the cycle, and then it can kind of slow our bodies down even more. Again, another caveat to this, using this strategy, is that if you're only going to rely on it in moments of stress and high anxiety, it's not going to be effective.
Yeah.
This is right. Like, it's something that you, just like any other skill that you have to practice. If you're practicing for football, and you don't practice all week long and you go into a big game, you're going to get demolished. You're not going to be able to use those skills that you need in order to be flexible and to be agile and to run the ball up the field. And so it's the same thing for learning how to manage anxiety. You can't rely on using this skill in game time if you're not practicing it between games, so setting aside time each day where you can
breathe. Yeah. And ground, right?
Yeah.
I think to your point, what I love about your analogy about the football thing is that even when you're in a very heightened place of your anxiety, just because you do the deep breathing one time doesn't mean that it's going to be effective. And so you do have to work at this. You have to develop this. So just like you're developing that football skill, maybe you're developing how to catch that ball or how to throw it just right. You also have to develop your coping skill in order for it to be effective. I know a lot of my clients, they're like, I tried that and it didn't work. Well, I'm like,
yes.
How many times did you try it?
And when and how?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
you talked about, sorry to interrupt, but you talked about grounding.
Yes.
And
I did mention grounding.
Yeah.
Let's talk about grounding a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So grounding is similar to breathing, but it's a way that you can kind of bring your attention back to the present moment. So when we are feeling really anxious, not only are we having that physical arousal right in our bodies, but our minds are in a totally different place. Our minds are no longer in the present moment, right here, right now. Our minds are in the future and what could potentially go wrong or what could potentially happen and how we are not going to be able to cope with that. So grounding ourselves really involves being aware of when our minds start to jump on that runaway train of thoughts,
Yeah.
and being able to take our attention and jump off of that train and focus more on the present moment and what's going on in the here and now. So there's grounding with your five senses that you can do, which is, being present in the moment and noticing what is going on around you. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel with your body? What do you taste? What am I missing? What other sense am I missing?
You got all of them: taste, smell, touch.
Touch. Yeah.
Yeah.
What am I feeling?
Yeah.
And then there's also our kinesthetic sense, which is like our sense of where we are in the world around us.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever experienced this, if you've been like in a state of fear, but I know when I'm in a really heightened state of anxiety, my mind is so much in the future and not in the present that I even almost forget where I am at the moment. It's not like I'm disassociating or I don't know where I am. It's just like, oh, I forget that I'm sitting here in front of people, talking to people, and I'm forgetting that there's other things going on right now, right here in this moment. So being aware of like your kinesthetic sense, where you are in relation to your surroundings, like, where in the room am I? Comparative to the floor and the ceiling, where am I? Comparative to the screen and my chair, where am I? Like that, just like, where am I with my surroundings can bring your attention back to the present moment. So have you heard of the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise?
I use it religiously myself and with my clients, and I think we got a couple of high fives from
every day
as well.
every day, every single day. Okay.
It's so effective. So tell the folk about this amazing strategy. Let's talk about that.
So this is where when you notice that your mind has wandered off to the future and it's stuck there, bringing it back to the present moment and noticing 5 things around you that you can see, 4 things that you can touch.
Yep.
And feel.
Yep.
3 things you can hear.
Yep.
2 things you can smell.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1 thing you can taste.
Yep. You got it.
So just like, it's just an easy way to remember when you're in that moment of stress, of how to do that. But again, just like the deep breathing, it's a skill that you have to practice. And so it does pay to just take these mindful grounding moments throughout your day, even when you're not stressed, even when you're just like eating a meal can be a great way to do this, where, how often are we rushing through our meals and we're really not focusing or paying attention on what we're eating? So if you can slow it down and use that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just notice, what do you see, when you're eating, your chicken dinner? Like, what does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it actually taste like? What does it feel like in your mouth? What are the different sensations that you notice with it? So, yeah, that grounding can be really helpful.
I actually have an app that I use called Liberate that kind of focuses on different specialties of trauma, right, that have been affected. They used to be free, now they charge it. Now I'm about to delete them. They start charging me all of a sudden. But it takes me through the the grounding process. It plays some music. I kind of put some earphones on. She's telling me what to touch. Feel your knees now, but. You're right, man. It really, at first, I'll be honest, I used to be like, all right, my therapist, Mary, I'd be like, all right, this stuff ain't working. She'd be like, well, how many times did you do it?
Good.
You said good, right?
Good. No, because I want you to, that's what I experienced in session. Well, how many times did you use it? And then what do you tell Mary? What do you tell your therapist?
I did it 2 or 3 times this week.
Right.
Well, you gotta keep doing it, Corey.
Yeah, but also the other part of it too is, right, okay, well, are you doing this and continuing to avoid those things that are stressing you out? Because if you're doing this and you're continuing to avoid those things that are causing you this anxiety, well, no wonder it's not working. No wonder it's not effective. Like, you got to do the things.
Yeah, I would ground myself and then go do something, right? I'd be talking to the person that triggered me the most, right? Or do the thing that I'd be put myself in the place I shouldn't be in. So yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. I shouldn't have hopped back on here. Y'all about to do a session with me in here. Oh no.
So my last question to you is, as we're transitioning back into some type of normalcy, and I'm using that very loosely, what can parents do to help support their adolescents and their children as they're going into this new space? So we talked about empathy, we talked about validation, but concretely, like what can they do as these children are going back into this back to school anxiety and back to school anxiety? What can parents do concretely to help with that transition?
So setting up a schedule for your child and helping them understand whether they're a little kiddo or an older adolescent, helping them understand what the new schedule is going to look like and what to expect. And so if that also means that a parent is returning to work simultaneously, what does that mean for care around the house? And what does that mean for, division of responsibility at home again? What are these new expectations going to be? The more that we can help children and adolescents feel like there is some predictability in the world around them, it can really help reduce those problematic levels of anxiety that are going on.
Yeah.
And then I also mentioned, just managing expectations and going back to that kind of systematic, gradual, hierarchical way of thinking in terms of like, slowly and gradually, how do we increase the demands for our kids? So realizing that going back to school is going to be a stressful event for many kids, even if you're providing them with that structure, the schedule, the predictability, it's still going to be a stressful event because it means a change. It means adapting and changing to a new way of, interacting with the world around us. And so if we can remember that this process of change can be incredibly challenging for all of us, then we can also understand that adding more demands as they are trying to navigate this new change is going to add even more difficulty, for our kids. And so maybe instead of, throwing them all the demands back on them at one time, kind of scaffolding it for them. So saying, as you're going back to school and there's this adjustment, I am not expecting, I guess it's you to, fulfill these obligations at home. I'm expecting that, during this transition, it's going to be more difficult for you to, I don't know, keep your room cleaned, or it's going to be, more difficult for you to do certain things. And so we're going to waive that for now kind of thing. And also giving them the grace and understanding that it's going to be difficult. So we don't expect you to have the best grades at this point in time, So we just want you to get used to being back in school. We want you to get used to interacting with, your classmates and your teachers in person again. And so we're not expecting, stellar grades at this point in time. And giving it some time.
Good. Yeah. I think something that you see is just what you said was just gradual, uh, gradual transition into it. And so really taking the step by step and not like throwing everything on your kid and expecting, the same results prior to COVID, right? And so that's the part of it. They need that ability to be able to transition and do it in a healthy way. Yeah.
I so appreciate that your last statement, Christina, because we got to remind ourselves and our kids that you're human, right?
Mhm.
And your humanity is much more important than your performance in school, your performance on, in your sports. You being human, feeling the emotion, connecting with those emotions, it's just so important. And in the hustle and bustle, we can dismiss those things from
Absolutely.
a child's reality. And one of my daughter, we chose to keep my daughter in online learning, as opposed to going back into the school once they opened up for hybrid. But I chose that because her teacher was playing to her humanity more than he was playing to her performance in school. And the results were, they were insanely great. She was more comfortable. Her confidence it has boosted. Her independence in doing her work has been incredible. But it's because every time he engages, he plays to the kids' humanity. Listen, I'm not concerned about. He wasn't concerned about them getting the best grades. He was concerned about how they were feeling, how they were enduring through the process. So that's just so true.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think about the parent-child relationship similar to like a supervisor-employee relationship. So
Mhm.
in the past, when I've had supervisors who are so demanding in performance and who don't really care about you as an individual, how that makes you feel,
Yeah.
and how that kind of impacts your desire to engage with that person or your desire to even perform well. So yeah, and for all of us, we need that that sense of like, okay, somebody cares about me. It's not just about the performance or the demands.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's key going back in, especially for all of our educators out there. Like,
Yeah.
right? I think there's a message there that, yeah, they're there to learn, but to not ignore the humanity part, the feelings, the emotions, the experiences that these kiddos are going through, because that's so much more important, right? And especially in these times, So,
Yeah. I,
yeah.
Sure.
I think this pandemic has done something for all of us. It's gotten us back in touch with, humanity again, our humanity again.
Mhm.
I so appreciate the fact that I know you all said it earlier. We've had to slow down. We've had to, disconnect a bit. It had its negatives, but it's also had its positives again. Um, Christina, when you talked about that demanding boss, I think I had like four of my bosses flash across my head, right?
Did you get triggered?
but but it's the ones that care about you, not your work all the time, that allow us to perform our best, right? So for all of those who are listening, you're leading an organization, you're leading a classroom, wherever you're leading at, this, all of us are going to be facing and dealing with anxiety at some point and on some level. And it helps that the people that you're leading, when they know you care about them, not just the work they're doing, it helps us all manage this crisis a lot easier. um, I was counseling a couple yesterday, and I had to just take some time and deal with one of the individuals I was counseling because the demand at work was so crazy that it was now affecting their relationship at home. He wasn't communicating with his kids. But like, hey, bro, I had to say, man, listen, I care about you. Your boss may not care about you, but I care about you. Your family cares about you, and you know being conscious that somebody cares can go such a long way. I think if the message that we can take away from one message we can take away is give each other grace, give your children grace, give yourself some grace, give
Yes.
people you're working with some grace, uh, because we don't know what we're going to be walking into, especially as our offices open back up, right? We don't know what our children have faced over this last year. We don't know what the people who are working with, what they've have to face, what they've been faced with this last year, what they're carrying as they come back into the office again. So we just need to be patient with each other, y'all. We just need to be gracious with each other. Go ahead, Christine.
Yeah, sometimes when when we talk about this idea of giving each other grace, or there, a lot of, even I have the experience sometimes where it's like, well, if I'm giving myself grace, or if I'm giving my child grace, I am allowing them to get away with not meeting their demands, or like I'm allowing myself to get away. I'm giving myself an excuse as to why I can't do this thing, and so I guess the way that I've come to understand how giving grace is and what that really means is it's more of it's not an or kind of situation. Either I'm meeting the demands, or I'm not being kind to myself. Like, it's an and situation, right? So it's like, okay, I can give myself grace, I can give my kids grace, I can give my coworkers grace, and I can simultaneously have expectations that they are meeting these demands, and it's not erasing the demands. It might be lowering the demands for a temporary period of time, either for ourselves or for our kids, but giving that grace doesn't give an excuse. It just is a way of, being compassionate to each other as human beings.
Yeah, I love the way you reframed that. That was great.
That was so good. That was so good, Christina.
Yeah.
Well, listen, y'all, can y'all believe it? Our time is up already. We've been hanging out. Christina, I want to tell you, thank you so much for today. Your posture, your demeanor, the way you share, it is so grace-filled, and I appreciate you hanging out with us today. I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you guys so much. And I really, truly do appreciate all of the work that you all are doing, and, like, advocating for mental health, and just knowing that it's something that we all face, mental health challenges, whether it's like a diagnosis or not a diagnosis. We all have this thing of mental health, just like we have all this thing of, physical health and spiritual health. And, it's something that is important for all of us. So I appreciate you inviting me once again, and including me in these conversations.
Listen, y'all, if you are in the Maryland area, I want you to check out anxietyandbehavioralhealth.com. That is her practice. She is a brilliant, passionate professional. We love her dearly, and if you need to get in contact with her, you need some further information. Her info is right there. Again, it's anxietyandbehavioralhealth.com. Check her out. She is brilliant at what she does, and if she can't help, I know she has a million resources that she can point you towards. I know you will hear her heart. She is just great people. I've known her for God knows, most of my life. We were talking the other day. We were talking yesterday, and I have a childhood friend that lives next to her, which is crazy how our paths continue to cross. I know. So a kid I knew when I was like 5 or 6, her sister lives around there.
Wow. What is it? 7 degrees of separation?
Right? Right? Crazy.
Oh, God. Well, look, y'all. Christina, Alicia, don't get off. Coffee and Candid Convo. We love y'all. We hope y'all have an enjoy your Sunday. If the sun is out, get out there and suck up some vitamin D if you can. But listen, share this out, chat, continue, get this information out. We'll be back next Sunday. We're continuing to talk about mental health awareness. We've got some great professionals coming your way, and we want you to join in on the conversation. We love y'all. Have a great day. Happy Sunday, and be blessed. Christina, Alicia, y'all don't go nowhere. I hang out for a little bit.
Okay.